Hello and welcome to another battle report. This one features my Eldar and Dark Eldar with some changes from last week against a 3 detachment army including Grey Knights, an Imperial Knight, and Imperial Guard. I've got star cannons on that tan one there. I realized that I've never ever painted or magnetized them, so I'll have to get on that. There are bright lances on all the rest of the Wave Serpents based on last week's result. I still have the 2 units of Hornets. I still have the Wraith Knight, 2 scatter lasers on his shoulders, and the Fire Dragons will be web striking with the Archon. I took 2 units of Dire Avengers in a CAD in order to open up the Wraith Knight, and then I took Warp Spiders and Fire Dragons and 1 unit of Dire Avengers to open up the Aspect Host, which is very useful. My opponent for this week is switching over from his excellently well-painted NID list to something very different, which explains why there's a lot of stuff that's not painted. He's trying out different combinations before he commits to it. The dude with the flag in the top left there is actually the comms relay. The Imperial Knight has battle cannon. There's Vendetta. You can see all the lasers on it. And he's taking the Nemesis strike formation. His Dread Knight has the sword and the incinerator. He's got 2 units of Terminators. 1 unit has halberds, the other unit has swords. Unit of Interceptors, they're not quite finished being built in the top left there. And then he has allied in some Imperial Guard. He's got vets. He has camo netting on the regular dudes who will be standing behind the defense line, manning the comms relay. Here's a look at deployment and terrain before the game begins. Terrain is placed competitively. We rolled to place it, as well as the objectives. We were playing a slightly modified Crusade mission with 6 objectives. Each one would be worth 3 at the end of the game. The only other special rule is that there are no sabotaged objectives. Everything is something useful or nothing at all. I won't spend too much time on this, but we did actually play 3 games. We re-racked twice. The first time we played, we only made it to turn 2. The second time, we just restarted turn 1 and played it over again. You can see Castle up on the right-hand side. Objectives were here, there, and everywhere. Nemesis Strike Force and other things coming in from reserve. On my first turn, I just moved up a little bit to get ready for moving up further later on. Nothing much else happened. I did flat out my Serpent over there, behind there. I did look up that rule, and I see nothing that says that a skimmer can't change his facing or any, so I don't know. I'm changing his facing when I go flat out. For his part, though, he had 2 mishaps on his deep strikes. This is the first time he's played a deep strike heavy army, and his Interceptors and his Dread Knight ended up going back into ongoing reserves. And the rest of his army only managed to do 1 hull point, which is a tremendously terrible alpha strike. So this is the top of turn 2. Between the 2 units of Hornets, 1 outflanking to each side of the table, and the Fire Dragons web striking right behind it, we took out the Imperial Knight. I also had the Warp Spiders available in case they needed to try to glance off 1 more hull point. We left the Terminators just kind of standing around looking dumb, and the reason we didn't continue the game is because he deep struck in his Interceptors. They mishapped, went back in ongoing reserves, and then he deep struck his Dread Knight, and it mishapped and died. So we just re-racked it and set it back up to come at it again. So this is the second game that we played. We actually started playing turn 1 of this game with this deployment style, and then just went back to the beginning because he mishapped and lost a unit on the very first turn. I got the Warlord trait that allowed me to infiltrate, which is why it looks a little bit more like Hammer and Anvil, and he chose to be much more conservative with the placement of his knight this time. So here we are at the end of the top of turn 1. He got the Warlord trait that allowed him to reroll his scatter with his Warlord. He has a Grandmaster in with, I think, the Halberds, and a Librarian in with the Swords, or Terminators, whichever might be reverse of that. Everything looked pretty good. He stunned the Wave Serpent on the bottom there. He forced Jinx on other ones and took a hull point or 2 off here and there. And otherwise just sat tight waiting to see what would happen in the bottom of turn 1. So here we are at the bottom of turn 1. I have the stunned Wave Serpent at the bottom here. It has 1 hull point remaining. Not much I can do with that one. What I did is I moved and actually flatted out both the other Wave Serpents on the other side of the board. The reason for doing this is because I knew I was going to have to give them something, and if the Terminators go after them, then it will probably take them a very long time to get back to my side of the table. Also, I was worried about trying to make sure that something would survive until turn 2. So here we are at the top of turn 2. The Dread Knight was forced to assault the Wave Serpent he couldn't kill. It blew up and took out 2 Dire Avengers. The Terminators, both units, were forced to assault the Wave Serpents because they couldn't bring them down either, including shooting the battle cannon from the Imperial Knight at them. So the Wave Serpents are still very, very survivable, very tough. Neither of the units of Dire Avengers is pinned, and otherwise he just sat tight and waited for something to happen. For my part, I am not afraid to put my Wraith Knight in reserves and deep strike him or walk him on the edge of the board, because I think there's enough firepower in the rest of my army to do work against the things that could hurt him. A lot of stuff that can hurt a Wraith Knight is like turn 1 drop pods, so I had held him in reserve. This is the bottom of turn 2. With his Imperial Knight castled up the way it is, there it would be really hard for me to get good angles on him to actually take it out in one turn, so I decided not to do that. The Dire Avengers had actually moved on top of the wreckage of their vehicles. We didn't put them there for simplicity. Hornets came in from outflank. The Serpent zero struck in by the Dread Knight, and my Wraith Knight deep struck, supposed to deep struck by the objective, but actually scattered off. It took my entire army's shooting, pretty much, to kill the Dread Knight, and it actually came down to a 6 from the Wraith Knight. Had I rolled less than a 6, he would have had a chance to deflect the wounds with his invulnerable save. If you saw the Vendetta at the end of the last clip, that's because he put it on the table before I started filming. He shot at the Hornets out of all the possible targets, wrecked one, forcing them to jink. Elected to jink. The Terminators, one of them, which has shrouding on it, started making their way back towards where the bulk of my force is, having easily cleaned out my Dire Avengers. One unit of Dire Avengers went down to Shriek, and then the other one went down to the, I think, the Incinerator from the Interceptors. So I have no Dire Avengers left on that side of the table. His Knight shuffled a little bit over to the side and took some shots at those Hornets, forcing them to jink as well. Here we are at the end of turn 3, relatively uneventful. The Fire Dragons re-embarked on the Wave Serpent, and the Wave Serpent and the Hornets snap-firing shot at... Actually, the Hornets snap-fired at the Vendetta. It was just the Dire Avengers and the Wave Serpent that fired at the Grandmaster and his Terminators and killed 4 of them. The War Spiders had jumped up on top of the hill, fired at the Vendetta, did nothing, and then used their jetpack move to get back down. The Wraith Knight, despite controlling a reroll 1's objective, missed with one of his shots and then did nothing with the other one. He made his 4 up invulnerable. And that's it. So it's the top of turn 4. The Terminators have no good targets at all. The Vendetta doesn't actually go after the Wraith Knight. He actually goes after the Hornets over there, which jinks again and manages to avoid all damage. The Imperial Knight continues to shuffle over and take some shots at things and is ineffective. So it's the bottom turn 4. Everything over here continues to sort of proceed as planned. The Terminators are having a hard time getting back. Over here, the Dark Eldar warriors come on and then they run during the shooting phase. I managed to actually do 2 hull points to the Imperial Knight. I forgot to mention earlier that when the Hornets had come on, that I shot one of the pairs at him and had gotten really lucky, got a pen and an explodes result, and did 3 hull points. So the Wraith Knight actually just managed to do 2 more hull points to it, but he has 1 left. At the end of the top of turn 5, Flicker Jump continues to be pretty awesome, but if you are not the declared target of the shooting attack, you can't do anything. So clever positioning of the battle cannon did force my Wave Serpent to jink, but my Warp Spiders were not able to flicker jump, so I took 4 casualties from that. The Exarch didn't go down, so I automatically passed my morale check, and then when it came time for the Interceptors to fire at them, they were able to flicker jump to the other side of the hill and get out of line of sight. In other shooting, the Vets dropped out of the Vendetta and actually put 3 wounds on the Wraith Knight. I didn't make any feel no pains. And the Vendetta once again forced the Hornet to jink. So it's the bottom of turn 5, and as things stand, I will hold 4 objectives if the game ends. Warp Spiders jumped up top, took some shots, and managed to actually get the guy that had the Psy Cannon. And that's it for that one. And then he holds that one up at the top there with his Imperial Knight. Those guardsmen hold that one there. My Wraith Knight, he shot at the Imperial Knight, did nothing to it. Shot scatter lasers at the guardsmen that were the vets that were near him, and then ended up having to assault them and didn't kill them until the stomp phase. And then only on an AP4 wound that the commander failed and invulnerable for to die. Snap firing at the Vendetta, which refused to jink. I actually ended up doing a hull point to it, which is far more than I thought I was going to do. But you can see the Hornet is holding that objective way over there in the corner. So the game goes on to turn 6. He drops the Vendetta into hover mode, but doesn't have enough movement to contest the objective, so he hopes to destroy the Hornet to at least take it away from me. All he does is immobilize it. I hold that uncontested, and he holds that uncontested up there. The Warp Spiders continue to be amazingly trolly. He was going to cast Psychic Shriek at it, but that is a shooting attack, and so I elected to flicker jump. He decided to opt to use a different power, and I let him because neither of us know the Codex that well. So he ended up not shooting them and just assaulting. And in the assault, he issued a challenge. I accepted with my Exarch. My Exarch and his Sergeant did nothing to each other. The rest of the guys in his unit did 4 wounds at AP3. So I took off 3 of the Warp Spiders, and then my Exarch took 1 wound. And this is so huge, I mean, you can't even... It's remarkable. He's a 2-wound model, and he automatically passes his morale checks. So despite having everybody else wiped out, taking a wound himself, he passes his morale check, passes his hit and run, and escapes from the combat and makes it some ways towards that objective that the Imperial Knight is standing on. So it's the bottom of turn 6 and what turns out to be the end of the game. I end up holding 4 objectives. You see 1, 2, and 3 there with the Wraith Knight, Hornet, and the Dark Elder Warriors. Over here, I don't risk turn 7 by getting my Warlord out. I just keep him safe. The Hornet manages to contest that. Up at the top, though, I finally roll another 6 with my Wraith Knight, and the Imperial Knight is gone. But I almost lost the Warp Spider in the explosion, but he survives and holds it.